IB Nation, welcome back to the Irish Breakdown Podcast live here on a Monday. So that means, of course, we're here for Notre Dame Recruiting Hour. We have wrapped up official visitors for the month of June for everyone, not just Notre Dame. Notre Dame didn't have anybody on campus this past weekend, but now official visits are open or ending, which means we now have our eyes set on what's going to happen next? How is the 2025 class going to finish out? And I actually just wrote an article that I think is going to be live on the site either at 2 o'clock or 5 o'clock today, Shaun, where I talk about what does an ideal class look like for Notre Dame, right? Like we always hear that, like the ideal class, the dream class. Well, let's talk about it, man. What is the ideal class and the ideal finish for 2025? We'll break it down as well. Wide receiver recruiting, linebacker recruiting, Jadon Blair, obviously set to make a decision on July 5th. What repercussions and impact will those things have on what the 2025 class could be for Notre Dame? We're also going to talk in segment 2, guys. I know we're all excited about Noah Grubbs committing to Notre Dame in the 2026 class, but by the way, the quarterback board in 2026 has shifted quite quickly over the last week or so. Brady Hart commits to Michigan. We had Brady Smeagol commit to Florida State, and also Ryder Lyons, all these names that you should know about in Irish Breakdown lands. He is trending towards USC. So some of these quarterbacks that we talked about for months and months and months may have some big impact on Notre Dame long term, because Notre Dame is literally playing Florida State this year and has played Florida State over the last few years overall a couple times. You also have Brady Hart going to Michigan. That is a Notre Dame rival, even though you don't play them every single year, a team that you hate. And then obviously USC implications, they get Ryder Lyons. So we're going to talk about all of that. And also, I had the opportunity to sit down with a very special guest. Her name is Sharon Black, who is the mother of Will Black, 2025 offensive tackle commit. Guys, I told her that I wanted to keep her for about 15 minutes, Shaun. 30-minute interview, big dog. You know how that works, man. That means that they had a lot of great things to say. So want to get to that at the end. Shaun Davis, got to drop some news on the air here in a second that has already been dropped on the message board at boards.irishbreak.com and on the good old X or Twitter. But as I start every show, man, how are you? Shaun Davis, recruiting analyst here at irishbreakdown.com, by the way. Got to get the introduction correct.
I'm absolutely amazing, Double R. I can't wait to hear this news, man. You got me on pins and needles, bro. What's going on? I'm super excited. Let's get to it.
Well, I made sure that Shaun knew about this last week because it was a very quick process. So for people out there, and we actually had a couple of super chats about it, Shaun, and I'm going to bring those up in a second here, but dropped on the message board at boards@irishbreakdown.com and had a great mix of people saying really nice things, but also a little bit of sadness, because like endings, they do bring some sadness at times, but then there's excitement for people on the other side as long as it's good news. And Twitter was kind of a little bit of a mix of the same. So I did announce that July 14th will be my last day on a full-time capacity with Irish Breakdown. Now, some parts of that, and I put this in the Irish on the message board, is that I'm still going to be here for an occasional post-game show. I'll still be here for an occasional crossover show, all those types of things. But July 14th will be my last day as the director of recruiting at irishbreakdown.com. I have not announced my next venture and place that I will be working for, but that will be in the airwaves probably the next week or so, somewhere in that ballpark. But July 15th, I will be starting my new venture. So unfortunately for you guys, or fortunately, depending on how you feel about me, I guess, 3 weeks left, and then I am out of here, folks. So thank you, first and foremost, and I'll do a more thorough thank you my last show, because this is not going to be the last recruiting hour with me and Shaun. We still got a couple weeks left here. But a big thank you to everybody out there who has listened, read, engaged, disagreed, like everything in between, man. I appreciate you all very much. So July 14th, again, last day here with irishbreakdown.com.
Congratulations to my boy Double R on everything that he's doing in his future. For me, the news came and I was super excited. I was super excited for my bro because I know his passion. I know his love for everything that he does, connected to Notre Dame, connected to football, the draft, coaching, scouting, and just to have an opportunity, like for everyone in life, man, we speak that everyone has an opportunity to take the blessings of God in their life and then to exponentially use that to go into other blessings in life. And that's something that man, Double R has an opportunity to walk into in this next phase of his life. So I'm super excited for him, his family, his young girls that get to watch him live out their dreams and encourage them to pursue their dreams. So, yo, this is absolutely fantastic, Double R, man. Favor of God eternally on you and everything that you do.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you, Shaun. And I had let obviously not just Brian know, of course, but I wanted to let Vince and Shaun Stiers and the IB crew the move that is going to be step forward. Yeah. And see, this is what I'm talking about. Like USMA 87. Let's talk recruiting. This is my battle today. USMA 87 was actually talking to my wife before I got on here. And I was like, do I start the show with it? Do I end the show with it? Do I save it in the middle of a break? Like, what is the best way to because I don't know for people out there that don't know this, but I don't actually handle praise very well, like compliments. I don't handle compliments very well. I don't, to be honest. I actually don't really like the shine on me very often. Like I don't, I think I'm good at what I do. I love doing what I do. And I hope that I read a good response from a reader perspective. But like the face to face, you're great. This is cool. It's like, yeah, it's not really my bag, but I appreciate everyone. I truly do. I wanted to get a couple of these super chats out, and people are asking where they can send a resume already. NC Notre Dame fans said that, hey, email Brian Driscoll at Brian. I think it's just Brian at irishbreakdown.com,
Brian
right?
at
So
irishbreakdown.com. Yep, that's
send it
simple.
over him. Maybe you'll get a nibble. But let us get these two super chats out of the way, or not out of the way. That sounds very, very negative, but because I truly do appreciate it. So we had Matt EM with the super chat. She says, Ryan, as a recruiting professional, what is your opinion on other recruiting professionals who make hurtful comments like calling kids weirdos behind paywalls, born to be? It seems unprofessional. Shaun, I don't know if you saw this one, but this was a recruiting professional that used to cover Notre Dame. Apparently, I think it's weak, to be honest, right? Like, I mean, I throw shade all the time, dude, right? Like I really do throw shade all the time, but I'm not, I don't call kids that I don't know weirdos, right? Like that was a little bit over the top. So yeah, it was, Matt, we can talk about that a little bit more later, but it was definitely not a great look by that
But
recruiting
that's what we do,
professional.
right? We use
Yeah.
other people to kind of unleash things that are in our heart.
Yes.
Obviously, there's still bitterness from his previous time. And he uses every opportunity, every trigger that's a young man, a recruit, a family member of someone, or just a situation to kind of unleash was already in his heart. So I pray for him, man. Eventually he'll get over it and move on. He should be over that by now.
I mean, you're talking about kids, right? Ultimately,
Yeah.
right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, whatever. There's definitely a very fine line between being a good person and reporting what you feel to be the truth. And if that was the truth, then you just need to keep that one to yourself. We also had another super chat from Frank G. Frank's, thank you so much. This congrats, RR.
Mm-hmm.
Best of luck in your future endeavors, and thank you so much. That's been the best part of this, Frank, is that everybody in Irish Breakdown land on the message board and on Twitter, everyone has been very, very nice about the transition. Very, very,
Yeah.
very nice about the transition. But Shaun, as USMA 87 said, let's get to recruiting. Let's get to recruiting here, okay? First segment, we're going to talk about an ideal finish in 2025, 2025 recruiting class for Notre Dame looks like, Shaun. Again, we always hear the super cliches. That's the perfect finish. That's an ideal finish. All those things always get thrown out. But what does it mean, right? Like, what does it mean? So let's make some sense of it, okay? I want to start with wide receiver recruiting in 2025 because that is the position that has the most volatility, in my opinion, down the stretch. Okay. Because where you are right now, you have two commitments from Elijah Burris and Jerome Bettis Jr. We know about the Shaun Terry thing. Shaun Terry also committed to Missouri over the last few days as well. So he obviously was out of the class. You now have for Notre Dame in the 2025 class of wide receiver, Shaun, you have two, potentially three spots if the right three want to come. Okay. So you have 2 to 3 wide receiver spots left, and you have 4 wide receivers on the board. Okay. Which is going to make this one very interesting because if Notre Dame does hit the inside straights, then they're going to have to tell someone no, potentially, Shaun. Like, if all 4 guys want to come, they have to tell someone, sorry, but we're filled up here. Like, we can't
Yeah,
take everyone. So, Shaun, I want to talk, though, about, because I think that this is a big thing that we've talked about in the past. When we're projecting out a wide receiver room on a year-to-year basis, we always talk about the X, the Y, the slot, and how it all works together, right? And finding
yeah,
guys that maybe could even do multiple things. I think the first thing we need to start with, Shaun, is that you need to find the right combination here, okay? Because
right.
if you have 4 to 5 wide receivers in a class that are all boundary receivers and win outside the numbers, but they can't play other spots, then you don't have a wide receiver room. You don't have a wide receiver room. If you have a bunch of slot receivers, what was the worst thing about Notre Dame last year? Was that you
Redundancy.
didn't redundancy.
Yeah.
All you had last year were good slot receivers. You didn't have anybody that can consistently win outside. Derek Meadows, tall, long, explosive boundary receiver. Dylan Robinson, boundary Z receiver. You have Tanu Kynes, who I think is a Z slot type. And then you have John Anthony Hall out of Fishers, Indiana, who is more of a slot Z type. Okay. So very different body type, Shaun. But I think the big thing for Notre Dame here is down the stretch. Notre Dame needs to find a good mix of different types of receivers. Too much redundancy is a bad thing in recruiting or fielding a roster.
And you talk about this position. I have a very interesting outlook, and I'm sure a lot of people will look at it differently. For the purpose of that, the actual what's needed. Most people would have certain wide receivers that are left on the board, probably ranked higher, or this is the must get guy. I'm different. My must get guy is totally based on what I look at the current layout of the wide receiver room and I see as a deficit or something we don't have in bunches, and that's explosiveness. Like, the most explosive player in this 25 class should be the must get player at that position, in my opinion, if we're going to talk about how we break down and build up a proper wide receiver room. Some people might see it different. They might look at it from a ranking standpoint. They might look at it from a height weight standpoint. Some people might look at it from a ceiling standpoint. For me, I look at it from what you just talked about, what is currently in the room, what is currently coming in the freshman class, and what is going to be lacking the most. And for me, that's where I come in and I say, okay, this is how I rank the guys that are currently on the board and the ones that I feel like are the must gets of the class. For
Right.
me, that's how I look at it. So it's just interesting, because I think it's all about preference, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's all about preference. And even with the former wide receiver coach, the first time I spoke with him, he said he wanted to build his plan was to build his wide receiver room like a basketball team. He wanted 2 dogs in the room that could play multiple positions or do multiple things, that could go inside and dominate, that could go outside to the X and dominate, or the Z and dominate. He needed 2 of those guys in the room. Then he needed 1 guy that was just a post up big guy, 50-50 guy. That was his vision, and he talked about it. So, and they needed somebody that was like a leader, that might not have been the most dominant production guy, but he was an extension of the coach on the field. And so, looking at that, that was his vision. I'm very interested in seeing how the vision of Mike Brown plays out. But I think Mike Brown's vision is bolstered, in my opinion, because of Mike Denbrock. Right? And I think that plays into not only the evaluation, but the recruitment, and then the development, and ultimately the execution of the position. I
Sure.
think in the next year or two, from a recruitment standpoint and what we see on the field, I think it's going to be a little bit different because of that combination and because of the vision they have, which is going to be very important to see how it plays out.
Yeah. Well, and Mike Brown's super important, Shaun. And I actually have a couple bullet points that I wanted to hit on with Mike Brown with this whole conversation. But to just kind of pencil in as far as like our vision for the wide receiver group, because this is the great part about scouting and recruiting is that no opinion's right or wrong right now. It's just your opinion, right? Subjectivity. Now, there are opinions that hit rates are still important, right? We could say like, oh, subjectivity of scouting, but if you don't hit on anybody, then you're still bad at scouting, right? Like there is a fine line there. But I would say it like this, Shaun, if we're talking about the avoid redundancy in the room, okay? And tell me what you think about this thought process. One thing Notre Dame has been missing is a difference maker, boundary, outside the numbers type dude who can win vertically down the fields, okay? Can win with speed and length. So first and foremost, for me, I want to hear if you agree with this. Notre Dame needs to get one of Derek Meadows or Dylan Robinson. They need to get one of them, okay? But if they can get both, you take both, in my opinion, because Dylan Robinson's a guy that I think could play all over a little bit. He's not just a boundary receiver. So I would say first and foremost, get one of those boundaries, one of them. If you get one, you're in a good spot. But if both want to come, you take both.
Absolutely. You get greedy because of that versatility of the one. I think Dylan Robinson is the more versatile, in my opinion, to this point. That bears out. His film bears that out. But then you talk about they are the big physical upside with speed receivers left on the board in this class. And who doesn't need the combination of size and speed at the position of wide receiver? Everyone needs that. And so the more you can go out and get kids like that, the more you're going to see better production and better talent on the field in your program.
Yeah, I think you just, again, Shaun, like you mentioned it, and we talked about it on like every show last year, like a post-game show. There were just games last year where Notre Dame just didn't have enough healthy bodies to even get a boundary receiver that can make any plays. I mean, look, I love Jaden Greathouse. Outside of salty Virginia peanuts, I am probably the biggest Jaden Greathouse fan that I know. But Jaden Greathouse, at least as a freshman, wasn't a starting boundary receiver on a major college football team. That wasn't his spot.
Right.
His spot was more slots, Z type of receiver, right? Because he's not the most. He isn't the fastest receiver of all time, so he doesn't threaten you vertically just off of him just being a burner. Like he just doesn't have that element to him. So, but unfortunately, he had to play that role because Dion was hurt and Jaden Thomas was hurt, and all these guys were banged up and injured. And we all know about the issues with the hamstrings last year. Jaden had to play a position that was not best suited for him as a freshman. And lo and behold, Shaun, they finally get some boundary receivers. Where's Jaden Greathouse playing? He's playing slot. Right? It's exactly where he should be playing. He's going to be a dominant slot, in my opinion. There's no doubt. But you need to be able to find outside receivers that threaten you outside the numbers, because we know, and this has been true in the run game and in the pass game too often the last couple of years. But there's been times where Notre Dame just gets so condensed offensively, and a defense doesn't have to, they don't have to honor your outside speed. Like they don't care. They're like, nobody out there can beat us. Right. So we're just going to push everybody into the box, everybody inside, and we're going to make you try to make a play one-on-one outside. And if you can't, you can't. And Notre Dame couldn't way too often. Right. So,
and that right there, man, this might be an entirely different breakdown in podcast by itself, but just talk about that. Like Notre Dame literally has played within the hashes for so long. You just talked about not vertically threatening teams, but then you really think that you can horizontally threaten teams when there's no vertical threat. No wonder the screen passing game has been so bad.
Yeah. Oh, the worst thing was it Tommy Reese last year, Shaun, or was it Jared Parker? That one of them loved to run mesh a ton, right? Where I was like, I love mesh, but like one thing that you need to understand with mesh is that you still need to have a vertical element to it, so that not everybody just condenses down into the middle of the field, because then mesh doesn't work. Like it doesn't work. So yeah, man, you need that position, Shaun. Like not that position. You need that style. So Notre Dame, get Derek Meadows if you can. I still have my doubts. Full transparency. Still have my doubts. Still do. But if you can't, you got to get Dylan Robinson. Have to get one of those two, because those are the two guys on the board that project that they can play boundary and that they can make plays down the field. That's the guys. The next one, Shaun, that I'll say, though, just kind of making sense of this, I think Tanook Hines has almost become like forget about need. Like he's a must get almost in this class, because he also brings something that none of these four have, Shaun. Like Derek Meadows can run. Dylan Robinson can run. but neither one of those guys are 10-4, 4.39 fast. Like, you just don't have enough of that on the roster. And honestly, nobody in the country has enough of that on the roster. That's why these guys are at such high demand for a guy like a Tanuk Hines, which is why he has 40 plus offers, which is why USC wants him bad, which is why Texas wants him bad. Notre Dame is still in a good position for Tanuk Hines, but Shaun, he's almost become a must get for me in this class because that level of speed, just don't have enough of it, man. Just don't have enough of it.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have to understand, we just watched Noah Lyles win the U.S. Olympic trials at 9'8", and he's a professional.
Crazy.
Right? This kid is like 10-4 and with a whole nother season of training, so he's probably going to lessen that. I think Sha'Carri Richardson slowing down the last 10 yards, ended up running a 10-7.
10.71, yeah, it was
10.71. She's probably like 10.5, high 5, 10.58 or 10.6 at the Olympics. So this is a young man that's running like, this just gives you a reference point of this speed. You don't have, ladies and gentlemen, you have some guys that can run. Chris Mitchell, says he's going to run 4.4. He was offended by 4.4. But this kid is what you don't have. And this, for me, is why he is the must get. He is the must get. I love the other young men. They're all productive, really talented, some high ceiling wide receivers. But Tanuk Hines, man, I posted a video. I don't know if you saw him at the 7-on-7 event they had at Texas A&M.
Oh, where he went up? Right? Yeah.
He runs a double stop comeback. And dude, the quickness in and out of the breaks, and then the explosiveness to go up and catch the ball. Double R. It's like
Shaun, that's the interesting part about him, though, is he's not just speed, man. He actually wins through contact really well, dude.
Yes.
Like, he does that big time.
Absolutely.
Man. Yeah.
And so to see that immediately, to have that immediately inserted into your locker room and into your wide receiver room, man, we need that. Notre Dame needs that immediately. And that, let me tell you something. Getting him, you talk about Mike Brown proving that he can close and proving what he can do. First of all, getting in the door, getting him to campus. Remember, the original thought was, oh, man, love his film, but, man, can they get him on campus? Well, they got him on campus twice, right?
Finally did.
And then they get him in for the OV. He loves the OV, and all of a sudden the news is things are trending well. Now the final deal is closed. Tanuk Hines should be and could be the sign to Notre Dame fans that, hey, wide receiver recruiting, it might be changing, right? And kudos to Mike Brown. But I think, Mike Denbrock has had a lot of impact on that as well, especially from the evaluation standpoint.
Yeah. And I think it was Indy Milton fans is curious why Tanuk wasn't on the board earlier. He's actually been on the board since December. There was just like no momentum with him for a couple months because he had never taken a visit. As soon as he got to South Bend, that changed very, very quickly. So yeah, man. And you know what the crazy part too, Shaun, is I really liked Tanuk's junior film a lot, but he was actually hampered with an injury as a junior as well. Like, he only played in 6 football games as a junior. So I don't think we've seen nearly the best of Tanuk Hines yet, which is
funny because I see someone in the chat talking about transit. Go watch the film. Obviously, they haven't watched this film or games.
Oh, yeah, he can run. Yeah, he can
run. It has nothing to do with speed. Like, he's just as explosive on film. You don't have to worry. He's a football player, which is why I just mentioned the 7-on-7, and I mentioned football things. I mentioned in and out of breaks, playing through contact on the comeback route. He wasn't just running a post using his speed. He just wasn't running a fly. He was actually playing the position and playing it technically sound and very well, and went up and got the ball and caught it with 2 hands. All football related, wide receiver related things in one clip, which is why I brought it up.
Have you ever seen Above the Rim, Shaun? You've seen Above the Rim,
movie,
right?
Of course.
Yeah. His clip reminded me of. Do you remember the one where who was it? It was one of the Wayans brothers, right? Was the friend? Wasn't it a Wayans? I can't remember. But remember the part where he's like, "Get off of me!" and just like dunks. Marlon Wayans like dunks the ball, and he's just like pulling himself up. He's just, "Get off of me!" That's exactly what Tanuk reminded me of in that moment, man. Absolutely.
That is
last point. Yeah. Last point about wide receiver recruiting, I'll say, Shaun, is that I think most people have kind of just looked at Fishers, Indiana, high school wide receiver John Anthony Hall is just kind of like a consolation prize. I will say this, Shaun. I want to hear. I want to hear if you agree on this.
Mm-hmm.
You get one of Meadows and Robinson. I'm good.
Right.
Again, if you can get both, great. But if
Right.
you can get one, cool. As long as you can get Hines. If you get two of those guys, one of and then Tanu Hines, then I'm totally cool with taking John Anthony Hall. I'm actually happy with taking John Anthony Hall because you know why, Shaun? I come back to the original point of this conversation, man. The original point. If you get, let's just say you get Dylan Robinson, Tanu Hines, John Anthony Hall for a conversation starter, okay?
Mm-hmm.
That means you got your outside boundary in Dylan Robinson. You got your speedster who can play a little bit all over in Tanu Hines. And then you got your route running savant who actually has pretty solid speed as well in John Anthony Hall. That fits together. That is the point of the conversation. That fits together. And that's what I think you need to find if you're Notre Dame. You need to find 3 wide receivers to end here that potentially mesh well.
You know what? What would you say was the best combination fit of a Notre Dame wide receiver room? You go back to like the Will Fuller. I think Chris Fink.
Chris Brown.
What year was that?
They had Chris Brown too, right? At one point,
I think it was Fink, Brown. They had 3 receivers of over 40 receptions. I know Chris Fink was one of those guys.
That's a pretty good fit. It's still not like I would say the most ideal room though, because like so I would say it like this: Will Fuller is the perfect Z, super speed, get him off the line, send him in motion, maximize release points. Like he's a Z.
Yeah.
Chris Fink is obviously a slot. Like he's a perfect slot too. Really good in and out of breaks, dependable hands,
decent
like that
speed.
Type of thing. Decent speed, yeah, explosive too. Like I mean, he had like a 40-inch vert, man. Like he's a pretty explosive kid.
Yeah.
But then I would say this, Shaun, is that like Chris Brown played boundary on that team, right? Because Chris Brown was a good receiver, but Chris Brown was like 6'1", 180, right? Like he wasn't a big bodied guy.
Physical, right.
So like if I could take the other two, if I could take Will Fuller and Chris Fink and throw in like a Chase Claypool as a full-time boundary or a Miles Boykin or like someone like that, that I think is the ideal room potentially.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. So you actually, the 4 on the board would, this is the funny thing is this recruiting class would be a diverse and complete wide receiver room. Like if you had all 4 of these kids in the wide receiver room, this is what you want. Like from a talent standpoint, usage standpoint.
Yep.
It would be perfect.
Nice. Would be nice. Just take them all. Take them all.
Take them all.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. If you could take them all, that would be a great time. There's no doubt. Shaun, last thing that you were starting to hit on that I really want to hit on with the wide receiver room, and then we'll move on to Jadon Blair, is look, whether it's his fault or not, there is a perception out there about Mike Brown right now as a recruiter. There is. Like, again, we can talk about it being maybe a little bit overstated. We can talk about it being completely false if that's your perspective, right? Because again, he did come into a transition where the previous wide receiver coach had stopped recruiting before this whole thing happened. And there was a weird transition. And you're also coming off a season where wide receiver production was terrible. Like it was just not good in 2023. So there was a lot working against Mike Brown. I would never say there's not. But whether you accept that or not, Shaun, there is still going to be the naysayers out there that are going to say Elijah Burris, Jerome Bettis Jr., that's not good enough. Like it's not. And you're right. Like, let's be honest with you. You are right. If Notre Dame, let's say, God forbid, Notre Dame didn't have options on the board and they ended up with that 2-man class and maybe signed even, again, I like John Anthony Hall, but let's say, Shaun, they signed John Anthony Hall because he's a Fishers, Indiana kid with the other 2 players in your class. That's a bad wide receiver group. Like it just is. It's a bad wide receiver class. If Mike Brown is able to close down the stretch with Derek Meadows, Dylan Robinson, Tanu Hines, John Anthony Hall, a combination of that 3, that quiets a lot of the critics, man, because that would be a heck of a finish, especially, and I know there's some mixed opinions on Derek Meadows as a player, and I completely get it, but from the recruiting ranking perspective, Shaun, and from an offer perspective, if Mike Brown's able to go and get Derek Meadows specifically, that is something to hang his hat on from a recruiting perspective. But you're also able to get Dylan Robinson. You're able to get Tanu Hines. Any combination of those 3, I think Mike Brown's has a chance to show that, like, hey guys, I got this. It's just a transition. I got this.
And I think when you look at the transition, it's easy because everything is fluid and it never stops. Recruiting never stops. So therefore, the interest from fan bases never stop and they constantly build. But no one takes into consideration, what it's like to walk into a situation, to have to learn the current roster, to have to develop those guys and get those guys to take steps forward. But then at the same time, kind of weed out what was there and to try to build the foundation for what you want in the future. And you're doing that thinking that your offensive coordinator is going to be one guy. And then the next thing you know, that guy goes on to be a head coach, and then you're left in limbo. Here comes another offensive coordinator with a new vision, and his new vision has more requirements or different requirements from you as a wide receiver coach to say, man, nah, we don't want to go after those guys. These are the types of guys we want to go after and put into this offense that we're building. So this transition has been multiple for Mike Brown. It's been challenging. Mm-hmm. And he just comes across to me as a grinder, Double R.
Yeah.
He just comes across to me as a grinder, not only as a developmental coach, but also as a recruiter and an evaluator. And that's what leads to him being able to get back in on kids that were currently on the board, but really there was no push. And now all of a sudden you see everything kind of be meteoric in the rise of the recruiting of a young man like a Tanuk Hines. And then Dylan Robinson is all the same thing. That was a meteoric recruitment where Notre Dame kind of just quickly got to the top of his recruitment and became a factor. So, you see a lot of factors and a lot of things, even though you might be disappointed. And let's take this in contrast, right? I'm going to throw you this alley-oop and let you dunk it because I know you can dunk this.
Hopefully I dunk it. Hopefully I don't drop it.
No, bro, you're going to Vince Carter this one. I already know. You're going to Vince Carter this one.
Wait, is that a 360 windmill or am I putting my
however you want to do
elbow
it
in the rim?
Be creative. Right. When I throw it up, just when you start hearing what I'm saying, I'm sure you're going to be creative enough to go ahead and finish.
Okay.
In stark contrast, one of the trouble areas has been wide receiver recruiting, right?
Yeah.
So even the former wide receiver coach, from a recruitment standpoint, was changing that narrative, right? Showed he was able to close, to get guys. But like you said, there was a little bit of redundancy in the guys that he got. And from a development standpoint, the explosive guys, for some reason, couldn't get on the field. That's another thing, right? So now we see Mike Brown. Immediately as he comes in, the explosive guys have really good games in the bowl game.
Absolutely.
Like, the explosive guys are getting moments. They're actually being used. Like, wow, what changed? Now you go into the evaluation, right? Another narrative. Notre Dame getting in on kids late, getting there, a Texas kid, right? Texas is in on them. USC, with the background they have with wide receivers. Notre Dame can't possibly get into the mix late and then get a kid like this to seriously consider Notre Dame. What happened?
Can't possibly. Yeah.
No, it can't possibly do that. Notre Dame can't go get a 6'2" kid, right? Big body kid that runs a 4.4 from California with USC right down the street and Washington and Oregon. They can't possibly go and get a kid like that. No. So we've seen that change, but we saw redundancy with the previous coach. And then in this class, with what's left on the board, we've seen an actual plan of, this is the vision of how a wide receiver room is supposed to look. Now, contrast that to, at least we knew the plan. Even though there was redundancy, we could look at that and say, we knew the plan. He laid the plan out. Did he execute it? No. Maybe not. But he really only had 1 year, right?
Sure.
Mike Brown comes in. We see the plan. Wow. Is he executing it? Yeah. Can he close? We'll see. Now, put that in contrast to the defensive line over the last 2 years.
Oh, no. Why are you doing this, Shaun? Oh, no.
Because we will question Mike Brown till the cows come home, right?
Yeah.
but there's evidence of certain things. Now,
How did
let's,
defensive line
let's
get into this one?
there. Go ahead. Go ahead, Double R. Go ahead. I want
Oh,
people to realize as they have these questions pop up from Mike Brown, I want you to
yeah,
really understand what has taken place during this transition that is extremely positive.
yeah.
Extremely positive.
I,
Right? But
I,
and we're dude,
yeah.
we have these same questions for another position that we had last year. These
You know what
same questions.
you know what I think it is, Shaun? You know what I think it is, truthfully? I think truthfully it is where the rooms were comparative where the rooms were when the coaches took over. Okay. So Mike Elston did a good job of producing, right? Like he was a good
Mm-hmm.
coach, Mike Elston. And recruiting was mostly good. I mean, like you
Mm-hmm.
obviously had some talent in there. It was mostly good recruiting on the defensive line. Al Washington has had a room that had more talent to work with, and you saw a
Mm-hmm.
big jump year two, which was great. That told me that, like, hey, you can at least get something out of the talent you have. That's great. I think that there's a big negativity around wide receiver right now, as a in a whole, not just wide receiver recruiting, because of what it had been the last couple years. Like it was in a bad shape. It wasn't Mike Brown's fault that it was in bad shape either. It wasn't his fault. Mike Brown walked into a room. And I know people will say, you went out and you got Bo Collins and Chris Mitchell and Jaden Harrison. And yes, all well and good. But you know why you needed to do that, Shaun? Because the room was in trouble, sir. It was in trouble. You had guys transfer out. You had guys lack of development. The room
Mm-hmm.
was not in a good place. It was not in a good place. So I do think that Mike Brown takes a little too much criticism at times. Absolutely. Because he walked into a bad situation and sometimes course corrections take a little bit of while to happen. They do. This isn't a all due respect. I'll put it like this, Shaun. I don't know if you agree with this. This might be too hyperbolic. I don't know. Let's take it here, though. If Brian Hartline decided to come to Notre Dame this past offseason, who is renowned as pretty much the best wide receiver coach in college football, okay?
Right.
If Brian Hartline walked in, I don't think that he completely 180s wide receiver recruiting like that. I think that you need some proof in the pudding that this is coming, right? This is coming.
Realistically, maybe he has a prior relationship with a kid that he was recruiting at the former school. I would never use their name, but at the former school, his former employee, maybe Notre Dame gets in on one or two of those kids. Does he have the ability to close? Maybe. Would it be better than the four guys left on the board for Notre Dame? I mean, and look, you and oh man, I'm trying to stay away from this double R. I really am.
Well,
I
you
really
threw a
am.
controversial topic at me, so I'm throwing one back at you,
No,
sir.
I'm just saying when we look at how we critique
Mhm.
people in recruiting, you have to be
Yes,
careful with the hot take, right?
that's
You
right.
really have to take a step back and say, what is the situation? What are they walking into? What should we really expect? What should we expect? Like the
Mhm.
four guys left on the board, should we really expect more than that? But maybe some people just feel like, well, it's Notre Dame. Like,
Right.
what does that mean?
Mhm.
What does that mean? Especially when it comes to the wide receiver position. It would be totally different if you were talking about offensive line. You remember when Joe Rudolph came in and all of a sudden kids we were talking to were just like, no, I'm interested in these guys over here. And we were like, whoa, wait a minute, this is a shift. Like, what's going on? And then the guys he ended up closing on, we were like, oh, okay. All right. Now we have to wait and see from a development standpoint what he does. And this year's offensive line is going to be a great picture into the development of Joe Rudolph. Fantastic. Last year wasn't he had two dudes last year. This year, with the youth up front, that's going to let us know really who Joe Rudolph is as a developer on that offensive line. And so for me, double look, Elston didn't leave the cupboard bare. it's fair to say the two interior guys that have pretty good grades going into the season are very much Elston guys as much as their current staff guys.
Sure.
So, I mean, so this year, from a developmental standpoint, is really going to be the telltale, right? Boubacar Traore, Armel Mukum, Brennan Vernon, all of the other guys. Okay, let's see whether or not these guys step up, make an imprint, right? Because the other guys are truly a mixture. And so it's going to be very interesting, man. I think you have to be fair. And I think we try to be fair. And I agree with you. When it comes to this I don't think wide receiver has really been a recruiting problem the last 2 years. Like, if Rico has stayed along with Braylon,
yeah,
and Jaden, the way he's developed, like no one would have looked at that class as a problem.
Sure.
That's a very promising young class.
It is.
Right?
It is.
I think Gilbert, Cam Williams, Logan Sadate, like KK Smith coming off his red shirt, that's very promising class. Very promising class. And so to add possibly, like you said, 3 of the 4 that are left on the board, once again, that would be a balanced and very promising class. Is it the 4 top 100 receivers that are left on Alabama's board? No. No, but I think we just saw a team win a national championship that did not have that in that wide receiver room.
Yep.
They didn't. So, we'll see. We'll see. But I think Mike Brown quickly, in my opinion, has shown or given breadcrumbs that possibly could lead us to him being a very good wide receiver coach in every area.
Agreed.
Like we see breadcrumbs that say, okay, he could be good. He could be really good.
Shaun, let's talk about Jadon Blair. This is the star safety out of Winston-Salem, North Carolina, Mount Tabor, 6'4", 190 pounds. Shaun, I'm going to say something, and I just want your reaction to it, okay? And you can go in depth on it, all right? And then we'll break it down a little bit deeper.
Sure.
Jadon Blair has a commitment date that is set for July 5th, and it has been set for July 5th for several months at this point. He wanted to commit on his 17th birthday. So we know that is when that is going to happen. Notre Dame has been viewed as the leader for some time now. I still feel good about that, even coming off successful visits to Michigan, Penn State, a couple other schools here, okay? I'm going to give a hypothetical, Shaun. You tell me your opinion, okay? And then break it down a little bit why you would be so excited about it, okay? July 5th, Jadon Blair is live on whatever YouTube stream he's on, picking what school he wants to go to. I don't know what YouTube stream he's going to be on. And he says, I will be taking my talents to University of Notre Dame. Shaun Davis, how should we feel about that, sir? How should we feel?
Are you kidding me? Be a huge get. Been absolutely huge get. Let me tell you something. This kid is an impactful top 50 5-star production for me watching this film. Production, talent, upside, everything. This young man is what you need. And this would signal something for Mike Mickens, right? Because there are questions. Can Mike Mickens do both? Can he develop and recruit both positions? Well, getting a kid like Jadon Blair, to be honest, Notre Dame were perceived as the leader for Jadon Blair when Chris O'Leary was great relationship with the family, had done a fantastic job. We had talked about Chris O'Leary turning the corner in recruitment. Things have been questioned. It was never a question of whether or not he could coach the position. It was a question of whether or not he could recruit and whether or not he really wanted to recruit versus his, aspirations of wanting to coach in the NFL. He answered the bell on that. So now he leaves. Now it becomes murky waters with Jadon Blair and his recruitment. Mike Mickens, he gets moved into the defensive backfield coach. And now he has to rebuild and get Notre Dame back to that pole position in the recruiting. The one thing that was going for Mike Mickens is that everybody knew based upon what they had seen and based upon the secondary as its perception nationally going into the 2024 season being a top 3 defensive backfield. Man, everybody felt like that his resume was elite as a developer. That played a huge part in his building this relationship with Jadon Blair and Jay Blair, his father. So as that move forward, to get back into that race and get back to that pole position where I firmly feel Notre Dame stands right now, it was very important to get back to that place. And Mike Mickens did an incredible job, and he didn't do it alone. That's the one thing I love about this Notre Dame staff. No one is doing this alone. Everyone is playing into this, whether it's Marcus Freeman, Chad Bowden, the rest of the staff, the position coaches, Marty Biaggi, who is helping coach the safeties and some of the other defensive backs, along with Mike Mickens. Everyone is playing their part. Everyone is playing their part, and Brian did an incredible job talking about how they were able to customize the official visits last week and how beneficial that was. And it was beneficial to be able to customize the official visit of Jadon Blair and the work that was put in by Chad Bowden, Marcus Freeman, and Mike Mickens leading up to that. And Double R, when you stepped away, I talked about the challenge that existed. Like, you have to credit, look, we have questioned safety recruiting for the last 2 cycles prior to the 2025 class. And we said and gave credit early on this year to the work that Chris O'Leary was doing. And he was answering the bell. He was finally giving Notre Dame an elite recruiting class at the safety position, right? His departure became a void. Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Jadon Blair, and we're going to talk about another void where Notre Dame is continuing to work to have to close the deal because of the departure of one Chris O'Leary. So what they have been able to do with Jadon Blair coming down the stretch, leading into his decision on July the 5th, has been nothing short of amazing, in my opinion. It really has. Because, I mean, you're stepping in. It's a big-time recruit. We both think he's a top 50 player.
Yeah.
We both think he's a top 50 player. You watch the film, you can compare him to Kyle Hamilton. I don't think he's a direct comparison to Kyle Hamilton. I think he has his own type of game that has his own little nuances, but he's still top 55 star when it comes to talent. And I think he can get even better once he gets to college. And one thing I will say, there is something that he shares with Kyle Hamilton, and that is a feel for the game. Whether you want to call it anticipatory, vision, whatever you want to give credit, or wherever you want to give credit, he just has a knack for the game, a knack for knowing where to be, being around the ball, but then more than anything else, executing what needs to be done when he gets there.
Yep. I don't know if I dropped this tidbit on here, Shaun, but I think I said it on a show with Brian. May have been on the mailbag this past week, but the Blair family also knows Kyle Hamilton, which is just kind of a little weird tangling of the web there, I guess, right? Because they're going to be guys that are going to be, if Jadon Blair comes to Notre Dame, he's going to be compared to Kyle Hamilton a whole lot. There's no doubt about that, just with the size.
That's the low-hanging fruit, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you just don't see guys that look like Kyle Hamilton and Jadon Blair play the safety position. Like, you just don't see guys that look like him. I mean, you just don't. So, yeah. I mean, look, Shaun, I would say there's 2 big things about Jadon Blair, okay? 2 big things. One, if Ivan Taylor is cemented in the class and he's not going anywhere, and we'll see what happens with that, okay? As of right now, it's not looking terrible. I mean, it looks like they might be able to hold on to Ivan Taylor. We'll see. I don't know. If they have Ivan Taylor and Ethan Long, those cemented in the class, Shaun, they don't technically need Jadon Blair as far as a number, right? You don't need him. You don't need a third safety if you don't like a kid, right? You don't need a third safety. But you know what, Shaun? You do need that talent, sir. You do need that talent. So you might not need the number, but you need the talent. You definitely want the talent. There's no doubt about it. He brings, yes.
You said they don't need it, but I think this is something that shows you the change in the dynamic of going from being a team that competes to being a team that goes ahead and becomes the prey, right?
Right. Exactly.
Because
Yep.
Georgia, Alabama, those are teams, Ohio State, those are teams that are predatory on the field, but they're very predatory in recruiting. Why? Because they don't give boundaries to talent. They don't say, oh, we already have our 2 safeties that we need in our class. No, there's another one we can get. Go get them. Why?
Right.
Because the evolution in the landscape of college football now is that more than likely, maybe not at Notre Dame, because a lot of kids want to stay and make sure they get that degree.
Yes.
But kids will leave after 1 year.
They will.
For several reasons, right? So the more talent you get, the more the more capable you are to absorb departures of talent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Alabama's going to absorb losing Caleb Downs. That sounds crazy.
Does sound crazy.
Sounds crazy.
Sounds crazy.
Alabama's going to be able to absorb losing possibly the best safety in all of college football via the transfer portal. But they have enough talent in the program and incoming talent to be able to absorb that. That's not to say it's not going to be a loss. Yeah, that's a loss. You feel that, right?
Yes.
But that's why you go out and you stack up on talent. That's why you go out and you fill up your wide receiver, your quarterback room the way they filled it up, right? That's why you go get talent at the wide receiver position, and then your wide receiver coach says, yeah, Mike Denbrock says, we're going to have a nice rotation of 6 wide receivers, and you start counting names like, wait a minute, 1, 2, well, man, they got more than 6 that we think can play. How's that going to work out? The mentality is changing, and I love it.
Yeah.
It's changing, and I love it.
I agree completely. The mentality is changing. There's no doubt. So, Jadon Blair, the talent you want, Shaun, the talent you want on the back end for Notre Dame.
Yeah.
But now with the Ivan Taylor stuff at least looming a little bit, he's also the number you need, Shaun, because guess what? You want Ivan Taylor in this class. You want a 3-man class of Ivan Taylor, Jadon Blair, and Ethan Long. That's what you want, right? But if worst case scenario, well, I guess it's not the worst case, but if one of the worst case scenarios is that Ivan Taylor doesn't end up in the class, but you get Jadon Blair, it's still a really good class, right? Like it's still a really good class, but obviously having both of them would take it over the top. But it's important for Jadon because if Ivan does end up not in the class at some point, it's important to have a superstar in the safety room. And I think that that's what Jadon Blair is. Last one, Shaun, with Jadon. We haven't talked about this. This would be the first recruiting win for Mike Mickens at the safety position. First one. Now, if he ends up getting Ivan Taylor to stay in the class, that's a recruiting win for Mike Mickens, certainly. But this will be the first recruits that Mike Mickens lands at the safety position. Just wanted to throw that in there. I feel like we haven't talked about that, but that's an accomplishment. Shaun, can you imagine if the first guy that you get at a position as a recruit is Jadon Blair?
Yeah.
It's pretty good. It's not bad. It's decent.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Whatever great adjectives you want to use to describe Jadon Blair. That would be pretty dope. Last conversation we'll talk about here, Shaun, and then we'll get into quarterback talk 2026 because I'm actually looking forward to this conversation big time, man. It is interesting seeing the landing spots for 2026 kids. Linebacker recruiting, the ideal finish, Shaun. Ideal is you land both Madden Faremo and Nathaniel Wusu-Boateng and you flex your muscles. You say, we're Notre Dame. We have Marcus Freeman. We have Max Bulla. We have Al Golden.
Yeah.
We are the best linebacker recruiters in the country. That's the best case scenario, right? I mean, let's talk about that, Shaun. We'll break down each one of these individually, but Notre Dame down the stretch here, because you lead for Madden Faremo. You are a potential leader for Nathaniel Wusu-Boateng. You have been at least at points in this offseason, okay? And I think that they still are the perceived leader for Nathaniel Wusu-Boateng. If you land both those players, Shaun, more examples of Marcus Freeman and this linebacker staff flexing their muscles and saying, we're going to get who the heck we want in recruiting.
Let me tell you something, man. The one position, you know how you meet expectations? The one position that you expect Marcus Freeman to have elite recruiting in is what? The position he played. Yo, if there's a head coach that is a quarterback, you expect him, Steve Sarkisian, to be able to recruit that position at an elite level. How about that? And so Marcus Freeman has done nothing but raise the bar at linebacker recruiting, no matter who the GAs have been, no matter who the linebacker coach has been or the DC has been. He has done that immediately upon his arrival as defensive coordinator. That's what he's done. And he recognized that immediately. I remember when he came in as DC, he was like, yo, we have to get rangier, faster, and longer at the position. And that first recruiting class as a DC spoke to that. And he's raised the bar as the head coach. In my opinion, you talk about that combination of Ramo and Nate NOB. If they can close with both of those guys, that everybody was excited about Kingston Villamuasa. Ladies and gentlemen, this combination, along with the rest of the 25 class at that position, that is scary because you know why it's scary? That it's going to the next level, and then I think you're going to actually see, I'm not going to say production, because I don't want to be disrespectful, right? I think from a production standpoint, what we saw from Maris, what we saw from JB, what we saw from Jack Kaiser, I think they exceeded expectations, in my opinion, from the first time they stepped on the field, right? I think they exceeded expectations from a production standpoint. But from an evaluation standpoint, they were drafted where they were drafted, right? I think what we're about to see now is that what Marcus Freeman has recruited, now if they get their opportunity to step on the field, the production hopefully will be similar, right? Or maybe even a little bit better. But even more than that, the upside, the splash plays, the game-changing plays that NFL scouts look for that take you to second-round pick, first-round pick, that is what we think is on the horizon at the position. And that is what we're talking about with these two young men. We're talking about game-changing talent at the position that you're going to see, hopefully, on the field at Notre Dame Stadium. So that says it all, Double R. You talk about what it would mean to get both of these guys. That's what we're looking forward to if we get both of these guys.
No doubt. So we're going to break it down. Let's talk Madden Ferramo, and let's talk about Nathaniel Wusa-Boateng, okay? I want to start with Madden Ferramo, and I'll get Shaun back in here to give his insight on Madden as well. So, guys, why this is important, and again, the ideal, look, from a numbers perspective, if you just get one of Madden Ferramo or Nathaniel Wusa-Boateng, you're golden, man. You're good to go. You're good to go. You don't need to freak out. It's not like you need 4 in this class, because I think people forget Anthony Sack is pretty good, man. Anthony Sack is pretty dang good. Josiah Key is very talented as well. If you get one of Nathaniel Wusa-Boateng or Madden Ferramo, you're in a great spot. But if we're talking about ideal, you leave for both. Let's finish the job and let's get it done and get a 4-man class, because let's be honest, Madden Ferramo is probably going to play Viper eventually. I know I'm joking, obviously, but like only partly joking about that one, but another conversation for another day entirely. Madden Ferramo, though, would be huge to this class because we want to talk about the impact of closing, right? Last year, we know how big of a deal it was for Notre Dame to be able to beat out Ohio State specifically, but also USC for a guy like Kingston Villamuasa. We know how big that was. And if you now go back-to-back classes into California and take a kid that Ohio State wants, that Alabama did want, but he didn't make his finalists, Texas wants, USC wants, that would be a massive win. So Notre Dame able to flex their muscles potentially with a star, big-time linebacker in the state of California, that would be huge. Absolutely huge. And we feel good about it. We do. Coming out of Ohio, Notre Dame visit, canceled his Ohio State visit a couple weekends ago. Madden did end up going down to Texas this past weekend, though. So we'll see if Texas has some say power in the end. But we believe Notre Dame is the team to beat without a question going down the stretch. And getting a big-time linebacker like that out of the state of California in back-to-back years when he has offers from schools like Ohio State and Texas and Alabama and USC, that is very telling of just what the caliber of linebacker recruiting is today. Now let's talk about Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng, and hopefully Shaun will be able to get back in here because I know he loves to talk to some Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng, of course, star linebacker out of Bradenton IMG Academy. He is a very interesting player because there's some easy parallels to be made of why he's a player that Notre Dame needs to close on. And I'll get Shaun back in here because I know he loves to talk about Nathaniel. So Shaun, a lot of layers to why Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng is important for Notre Dame. Again, if Notre Dame gets Madden Faremo, they don't technically need Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng as a number, right? You have 3 is a good number for a class, okay? Decision timeline for Madden. Someone asked in the chat. I would be shocked if it went. Actually, I won't even say shocked. I believe unless something drastically changes, something will happen before the season starts. So something this summer for Madden for Ramo. Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng, Shaun, and he was teasing the crowd a little bit about, hey, I'm gonna have some big news coming here. We'll see if a decision date gets made, or we'll see, man. We will see on that. Shaun, several reasons though this is big. Okay, let's break this down one by one. One, Notre Dame did have the inside track early, right? I mean, it's family, right? It's quote unquote family. His brother was a All-American player at Notre Dame, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Now that doesn't always mean that is going to be the path they take. We've talked about like Emmett Mosley, Emmett Mosley just didn't want to come to Notre Dame, despite both his parents being All-American athletes at Notre Dame. Like he just didn't want to come. But I think that you had a inside track, and it would be very important for Notre Dame to finish off a big-time talent of a younger brother of a former Notre Dame All-American, without a question.
And like you just talked about, inside track naturally is there. Family, background, pedigree. I think also just who he is as a kid, the makeup of the young man. Academics are very important to him, right? That bodes well with his connection. And I think also just who he is as a young man, the background, family that's built on faith, similar to what we saw with Kingston and his family when it came down to Notre Dame and Ohio State. You could kind of Madden Faremo, same thing, like his family and their background and what they believe in. Those are similar traits to the Owusu family, and faith being very strong for them as well. So there are a lot of factors other than physically his brother just playing in Notre Dame and having relationships and things of that nature that connects him to Notre Dame and makes Notre Dame a really good fit. On top of, like we said, linebacker recruiting, who he's going to be playing. Ladies and gentlemen, I can't stress this enough. Good players want to play with other good players. I don't care what sport it is. Good players want to play. Go to a local YMCA. You're going to see people that are good players playing with other good players. No one wants to pick guys that they don't know whether or not they can play. They want to play with guys that they know can play. And so it's the same thing with him. So it bodes well that Notre Dame has a lot of areas that he's looking for checked. So ultimately, it's going to come down to Phil, right? And whatever this announcement is, I'm sure that it's going to be something that Notre Dame is going to be in the mix. That's the feeling I have. That's the feeling I have. No matter what decision it is, Notre Dame is going to be right there in the mix and a very important part of whatever final decision is made.
Yeah, Notre Dame will be in it for sure, Shaun. I mean, like right now, I would say that it's most likely he heads back north, is kind of like my vibe on this one. I know USC did a decent job with him, but like today, and again, I think Notre Dame has a slight lead, but Notre Dame, Ohio State, Michigan are probably the top 3 schools, I would say, as of today. That's kind of the vibe that I get. So Notre Dame will certainly be in it until the end. We will see if they're able to outlast, because again, Shaun, we talked about this on last week's show, I think, probably.
Mm-hmm.
But this isn't just getting an IMG kid, which you need to get a little bit more regularly. This is also getting a Maryland DeMatha Catholic kid, which matters so much, very much matters.
Man. And to talk about fit from an evaluation standpoint, to me, he fits more of what Notre Dame has been able to develop and recruit of recent And I think Michigan fits that mold. What they've been able to do, I love what Michigan has done at the linebacker position over the last 2 to 3 seasons. If you really look at it,
Oh,
you
Junior
go.
Colson. I love Junior
It's
Colson.
safe
Yeah.
to say the
Yeah.
linebacker position at that other school you name, you can honestly ask from an evaluation standpoint, have they really met expectations?
Mm-hmm.
Like they've gotten 5-star talent in, and you're asking after 2 seasons, like, okay, where is this guy at? Or I thought
Yeah.
this guy was supposed to be the next one. I'm
Meanwhile, it's Tommy Eichenberg that turns into their star, right? It's kind of weird.
exactly.
It's kind of weird. Yeah.
So I mean,
Yeah.
for me, just from a coaching standpoint, I
Mm-hmm.
really think it's going to come down to Notre Dame, Michigan, in my opinion.
It
In
could.
my opinion.
It could. You're not
Yeah.
wrong. It definitely could. It could go that way. So we shall see. We shall see. But that is the ideal finish. Again, folks, just to recap it, if you're joining us late, thank you for being with us. Hit that like button, by the way. There are really a big need for wide receiver recruiting. Again, we've talked
Mm-hmm.
about there potentially being 3 spots. You need outside variable. You need a guy that's fast and explosive, and then you can fill in the third with whoever the heck you want at that point. Okay, linebacker recruiting. Get one of Madden Faremo and Nathaniel Wusu-Boateng, but also flex your muscles and get both, because why not? Because you are Notre Dame, right? We are Notre Dame. What does that mean? That means go get every linebacker you want, because you got a lot of great linebacker developers and minds on the coaching staff. Go get both. And then Jadon Blair, just because you need him. You need
Yeah.
that talent, man. You absolutely
Yeah.
need him. That is our ideal finish to the 2025 class. We're going to get into 2026 quarterback talk next, Shaun, but we did have, I think, a couple more super chats that came in. So let's get the super chats out now, and then we'll get into 2026 talk, because, guys, I'm excited about this conversation, man. I told Shaun before we started, I'm excited about this. So we had Tommy Guns. Tommy, what's up, man? Super chat. I'll miss you, man. Good luck with what's next. Thank you, Tommy. It's very much appreciated, my friend. Very much appreciated. We had Ronnie Reeves, Shaun, who also super chat, said first ever super chat. Thank you, Ronnie. Just wanted to wish you best of luck, Ryan. Thank you, sir. You've been a major reason I've listened to IB, and you will be missed. Oh, Ronnie, that is much too kind, sir. Thank you so much. I truly, truly appreciate that, my friends. We also had Andy Milton fan, Nathan. What's up, man? Thank you. Ryan, don't go, man. Seriously, though. Congrats on whatever you're doing. FYI, part of me hopes you're going to 247 just so I can watch Brian Driscoll go off.
Man, that would
I,
be hilarious. Oh, that would be hilarious.
I can't do that to anyone. I could be like, oh yeah, we'll see where I'm going, but like I'm not going to 247, guys. So I'll break that news now. I'm not going to 247 Sports. But thank you so much for that one, Nathan. And then we actually had a question, Shaun, from Ida Benami. Ida, thank you so
Yeah.
much. Said, how important is Carter Allman to Notre Dame's program and to keep him on the staff? Haven't heard much about him until recently. Love seeing Notre Dame paying up. So, Shaun, for people that don't know, so Carter Allman has been on the recruiting staff for a minute now under
Mm-hmm.
Chad Bowden. So I think the reason that you haven't heard about him as much, in my opinion anyway, is so with Notre Dame's recruiting staff, Chad Bowden's going to get a lot of the conversation because he is who he was, right? I mean, he is who he is, and he's a great at what he does. Also, Shaun, though, you had Dre Brown, who was on the staff, who was director of scouting, who is now the DPP, director of player personnel at Illinois. Obviously, he was a big name. We knew his name, right?
Mm-hmm.
Caleb Davis is also the DPP down at Troy. I mean, this just happened the last several months that a couple guys on the recruiting staff have gotten director of player personnel positions at various institutions. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, I didn't honestly, this is just the next in line, right? Like Carter Allman, guaranteed. Okay. It almost just happened, but he will be a director of player personnel at a university somewhere sometime soon. He's already gotten a
Mm-hmm.
couple opportunities out there. All right. So I think it's just more, why haven't you heard about him as much? Because there's been some superstars on this recruiting staff, man. I mean, again, we're talking about just a year ago, you had two other young men that that are now director of player personnels on the major Division I level. One guy in the Big Ten at Shaun's Illini, right? So this has happened. This has happened pretty quickly. You guys are going to know Carter's name. He's being mentioned more and more over the last couple months with recruits. He's going to be a star in the director player personnel department. He's going to have a big position sometime soon. This is big though, Shaun, to get him and to not let, because look, losing Dre, losing Caleb in one offseason, that's a lot of turnover one offseason for recruiting staff, man. Getting Carter Armon to come back, I think it's big time for Notre Dame to have that known commodity on the staff a little bit. You know what I mean?
I think something that should be of importance, how important is support staff? I'll go back to the Charles Jagasaw recruitment. Transition, you don't have an O-line coach. All of a sudden, the contact period opens up in January. Who's the first coach down at Charles Jagasaw School? Trevor Mendelson.
Yeah.
Support staff at the time.
Yep.
Laying the groundwork that Harry Heastan came back and closed the deal on. So it's a lot of things that happen behind the scenes from a recruiting standpoint that a lot of people wouldn't know. This guy was important because he was able to be here at this moment or make this call or do this or make this contact. So support staff is very important. And I think keeping Carter keeps some continuity. You didn't want to lose 3 guys from your support staff in one offseason. That would have been man, that's a lot. That really is a lot, especially going into your fall visits and everything that you're trying to do, setting up the 26 class. So Notre Dame needed to step up. They did that. Salute to them for doing that. And everyone, we see the front line, we see the coaches, we see the assistants, and then we see the players. But definitely always send your support to the support staff that's behind them and undergirding them in everything that they do, because their importance, from assistants, to the coaches and everyone else, they are highly valuable to the success of this program.
Absolutely. I mean, we talk about Chad for obvious reasons. We've talked about Dre for obvious reasons, but there's a lot more great individuals on the recruiting staff. Very well said. Folks, that's the last super chat we have. We're going to get into 2026 quarterback talk. We're going to take this into a much different direction than what we've done on this podcast so far, okay? Before we do, hit that like button. Make sure that you are subscribed to the podcast. Hit that notification bell. If you haven't checked already, go to boards.irishbreakdown.com for latest recruiting and team intel. We'll have some more recruiting intel for you all later this week with where things stand with the rest of the 2025 class. Make sure, whether you are listening to us on Apple, Spotify, or anything in between, hit that like button as well on there. Actually, you can't hit a like button on there, can you? You can hit the favorite button though, right? 5-star reviews. You can obviously leave a review and tell them you love Ryan and Shaun, best team on IB. Make sure you hit that as well. And we'll talk about quarterback recruiting here, 2026 on the Notre Dame Recruiting Hour on the Irish Breakdown Podcast. Shaun, now that I have completely butchered that outro, okay, we're going to get into a good conversation here, 2026 recruiting, but not in the traditional sense, right? We're not here to tell you where things stand. You all know where things stand. Noah Grubbs is the commit to Notre Dame in the 2026 class, okay? Star quarterback out of the state of Florida. But Shaun, guys that we had talked about for months and months and months, 2 of them went off the board this weekend or this last few days, committed to their prospective school. And there's one that's trending to a certain school as well. And funny enough, is all 3 of these additional quarterbacks we'll talk about on top of Noah Grubbs have relevance to Notre Dame, and for various reasons, a lot of relevance. So let's talk about this, Shaun. I want to get into this talk right now. For a while there, for a couple months, we had the conversation of, and the back and forth as a fan base between Noah Grubbs, Brady Hartz. Who do you like better? Noah Grubbs, Brady Hartz. And they both are coached, obviously, by Balin Trujillo, who is a great quarterback coach in the state of Florida that came on the show. They were both very high on Notre Dame as well, Shaun. I maintain that if Notre Dame did not take Noah Grubbs, they probably could have gotten Brady Hartz. I maintain that. I believe that, okay, wholeheartedly. Well, Shaun, Notre Dame did like Noah Grubbs a lot, so they took Noah Grubbs' commitment. Well, Shaun, where did Brady Hart end up? Where is the worst? Well, not worst possible, but where, as a Notre Dame fan, if you are built a Notre Dame fan, if you grew up a Notre Dame fan, your roots are Notre Dame, okay? Fandom. What is the worst place that Brady Hart could end up?
Are you a House of Dragon fan? Double
Oh,
R.
I am. Yeah, I was watching last night. Yeah, love House of Dragons. Yeah.
The whole moment, the killing of the baby.
Oh,
You know, when you
yeah.
have that moment where you're like, no, no. And then you're like, what? They really did that? That was like the stab in the heart that Brady Hart committing to Michigan was for myself.
It was sad, wasn't it? Wasn't it
It
so
was just
sad? It
like
was sad. It was sad.
anybody but, anybody but them.
Yeah. People were putting
Anybody.
future casts into Clemson and stuff, Shaun. I would have been like, all right, cool,
All
Clemson.
right,
Good job,
cool.
man.
Florida State. All right,
Yeah.
cool. He stayed close to home, I understand. Look,
Yeah.
for me, it's a double whammy, right? Because I
Yeah.
was in on JJ McCarthy early on when he was playing football here in Illinois.
Okay.
Right? My hope was, oh man, I hope Notre Dame gets in on this kid. Right? Then he goes to IMG, and then Jim Harbaugh ends up in Michigan. And next thing you know, it's like, oh man, he goes to Michigan. It was like the same feeling all over again, even though we have a quarterback that I like a lot. I like Noah Grubbs. I like Noah Grubbs. So I guess you can just count it up to me kind of being selfish and greedy a little bit as a fan. But
Yeah.
I would have taken any commitment elsewhere other than the Michigan Wolverines. I promise you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man. It was out just seeing that. It's just like, oh boy.
Well, Shaun, same. I saw that and I was like, oh no, Brady. Funny enough, I guess I can say his name because it's fine. Yeah, I don't think this was told in confidence. So I texted Balin, Shaun, after that. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
Michigan? And I was like, oh, everyone was talking about Clemson. Like Clemson was the talk. And apparently Clemson wasn't even in Brady Hart's top 3. Wasn't even in his top 3. And people were
Now
putting like
that just
future cast picks in. Like they're just throwing in the crystal balls. And he wasn't even in their top 3, dude. Wasn't even in his top 3.
that makes me feel wonderful to hear that. That makes it a little bit better. That he just disliked Clemson that much.
Well, I would
Like,
say
don't
disliked. Just
no, no,
not in
no.
top 3 school.
Let
Yeah.
me go. Because I'm
Yes,
just
go.
like, let me speak. This isn't
That's
what
it.
he said,
Spin.
but I'm just
Let it
imagining
spin.
this is what he said. Like,
Go
the
ahead, Boomy
hill is
Miles.
nice. The
Go
hill
ahead,
is
Boomy Miles.
nice.
Spin.
The rock is nice. Dabo, you're pretty cool. I like you. You're guard fan, man. But DJ and K stink. Let's just talk about it. DJ and K stink. Neither developed. I can't see it there. I think the program is on the way down. There's no way I'm coming. I think that's what he said. I'll just put that out there. I think that's exactly what Brady Hart said. Nah, I don't trust your quarterback development to this point. All of your offensive guys have left you. And since then, yeah, nothing at the quarterback position. But I just hate that he turned his eyes towards Ann Arbor. You didn't have to turn your eyes towards them. But I understand. I understand. Because Sharon Moore, in my opinion, has shown himself to be a really good. If you can talk about development of the position, more than anything, he knows how to tailor make an offense around the talents of his quarterback. And then he is a really good in-game play caller. And that's invaluable for a young man to come in and trust, knowing that he has that as an offensive coordinator. And now he's the head coach. So, I don't fault him at all. I think it's a very smart and wise decision, honestly, as a young quarterback to go to that situation. I don't know what the program is going to do under his helm in comparison to Jim Harbaugh, but as a young quarterback, I would definitely
Yeah.
be more trusting of the situation in Michigan rather than Clemson.
Well, luckily, Shaun, I was told that another top 3 school for him would have been one that you probably would have hated even more than Michigan.
Oh,
Okay.
don't say
So
that. Don't say that.
it may have been worse than Michigan, man. May have been worse.
Worse?
Yeah.
Worse?
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I
Yeah.
mean USC?
No.
No? Miami?
No. Miami was one of his finalists, but that wasn't where I was going with that one, though. It wasn't where I was going.
Somebody that I would have hate for. Hate.
Mm.
That's tough, double R. It's not too many
We'll
programs I
talk.
have just pure hate for.
We'll talk off the show. We'll
Okay.
talk off the show. We don't
Okay.
have to go down that rabbit hole. But yes,
Okay.
but he ends up in Michigan, Shaun. Let's talk about it from what Michigan is getting for a second, okay? Because hey, man, we might hate it as Notre Dame fans, but that's a heck of a win for Michigan, dude. That is a heck of a win for Michigan. I think
Mm,
that you get one of the more natural passers in the 2026 class. I think you get a
yeah.
kid that is very confident and has a really good head on his shoulders. And I think you got a kid that has some pretty good athleticism overall as well. So, man, I was not a big JJ McCarthy fan, Shaun, but Michigan got a lot out of him. Okay. They got a
Yes.
lot out of him. They
Yeah.
did. And he won a national championship with him. Brady Hart, to me, is a more natural passer than JJ McCarthy ever was. JJ might probably a better athlete, right? JJ probably a little bit of a better athlete, but as far as
Yeah.
like pure talents, man, pure talents, I think Michigan got a heck of a steal here. Heck of a steal.
Still, man, that's a perfect word for it. I think you described it perfectly. I think what
Yeah.
they get, natural passer, natural leader, competitive. That's the one. I think he is just as competitive probably as JJ McCarthy was. And I think that's probably what Shaun Moore probably saw in similarities, right? Because I think just from pure passing, I would probably say Brady Hart's a better natural passer of the football than JJ McCarthy.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Just
Agree.
naturally. I mean, actually, I think the better passers in this entire class were the two Brady's, in my opinion. At least two of the
Both
top three.
both both in the conversation for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I can
definitely in
get
the
there.
conversation. So, yo, I
Yeah.
think they're getting a fantastic quarterback. And I think Shaun Moore now, I think he's chomping at the bit, right? Because he doesn't really have it's a big get because of what's currently on the roster. That's a
Right.
void.
Right.
That's the question about Michigan. Michigan would be an easy top two team if they had a quarterback. Like if JJ McCarthy was there again this year, if he had come back, oh, they're probably top two.
You,
And then it's
you
probably them in
you're
Ohio
not
State.
you're not a big Alex Orgy fan. You're not a big Alex Orgy fan. I don't know.
I just trust Shaun Moore to get what he can out of the young man. But as far as a passer, and
Yeah.
no.
Athlete, sure.
He's
Passer,
definitely
no
a heck
idea.
of an athlete, but as a
Have you
passer,
ever seen
no.
him play basketball, man? His basketball highlights
No, he
are
can hoop. He has
crazy.
some game.
Oh, I need to send you a video I saw of
What
him
dude?
with this crazy like 360 dunk. It was nuts. It was
Have
nutty.
you?
Yeah.
I mean, look at his legs.
Yeah.
Look at his.
Yeah.
I don't. Does he even wear pads? Like his legs are just tree trunks. He came on the field in the Rose Bowl. I was like,
He's a
yo,
strong kid. Yeah, he'll be able to run, man. I don't know
absolutely.
how much of a passer he is, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Speaking of Brady's though, Shaun, you already
Yeah,
mentioned the other one.
yeah.
Brady Smigel. It's
Mm-hmm.
with Florida State, Shaun. Florida State. This one, because I had heard him do interviews in the past where he talked about Florida State briefly, but Brady did a great job of not really showing who his
Mm-hmm.
top schools were, right? Like he said great things about Notre Dame, obviously. I think Notre Dame would have been one of his top schools if they would have, pursued him more heavily. I'll put it like that. But Florida State is one. You got a California kid going all the way over, Shaun, 6'4", 205 pounds. I know you were very high on Brady Smigel from the rip, man. You were a big
Yeah.
fan of this kid. So your thoughts on him ending up at Florida State, man? Seems like I'll say it like this, Shaun. I think that any quarterback under Mike Norvell and Alex Atkins is going to have a chance to be very good and very successful. I will say this though, he's an interesting one because at least at Florida State, they've been kind of running more with the athletic prototype at quarterback than the
Yeah.
pure pocket kid who Brady Smigel is. So I'm just interested to see how that fits. But man, nice pickup early for Florida State, the Seminoles.
Very good pickup. And I think Coach Norvell is probably going to get the best passer of the football that he's had during this time there once the young man joins the program. So very interesting as we go through these quarterbacks. Like you said, I think Notre Dame probably was top two for the three previously mentioned quarterbacks. If I were willing to bet, I would say at least top three. I would feel really comfortable saying Notre Dame was in the top three for grubs, Brady Hart and Brady Schmeichel.
I
Which
think they would have. I think they would have been in for Schmeichel if they would have prioritized him in the
yeah,
class for sure. I think they would
yeah,
have had a chance to be there. But I
yeah,
mean, Shaun, for the other two, they were number one.
yeah,
Like they were number one. I
yeah,
mean, that's
yeah.
another thing we didn't really talk about. What like the Michigan thing is like. I guess Michigan probably doesn't care, but like you were the second choice, dog. Like you were not the first choice. You were not. I mean,
You were the fallback, bro.
you really
You
were
were the
the fallback
fallback.
though. You were the
Tell
fallback.
EJ Holland that. Tell him that while he glows. Like, dude, you were the fallback. Relax. Relax.
It's funny, Shaun. I've never spoken to EJ Holland. He seems like an interesting guy. I
He's
don't
the
know anything about
weirdo.
him.
He's the weirdo. You know how people project onto other people,
Yes,
right? He's the
yes.
weirdo in the situation, honestly. That's yeah,
Probably the guy calling a bunch of 16, 17, 18-year-olds weirdos is probably a weirdo. Yes, I
that's
agree.
kind of
Probably.
weird
Yeah.
behavior. But no, I was on Brady the first time he was a 2-play tape guy for me.
Okay.
First 2 plays, I'm like, okay, all right, I've seen enough. And he was one of the guys that, if I'm not mistaken, Notre Dame actually flew out and watched him in person.
They did.
Bro.
Yeah. Yep.
So
Gino watched all these guys,
never,
which is why I trust the Grubbs thing, right,
yeah,
Shaun? Is that
yeah.
Gino has seen all these dudes throw in person. They've all been to South Bend. So yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was like 5 of the guys that were, because I don't know, did they see Curtis throw?
I think they did see Curtis throw, but there
Okay.
wasn't much interest from Jared Curtis throughout this whole thing. So yeah.
Yeah. I think he's
That
one of those
kid's good
kids.
though, man. That kid's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. I think he
Yeah.
pretty much knew where he wanted to go.
Yeah.
I
That
think he pretty
kid.
much knew where he wanted to go. But no. Yeah. Norvell, Seminoles. Hey, you kudos. You got a pretty good throw of the football.
Yeah. Oh, they got a great thrower of the football. I'm very
Yeah.
interested to see again how they change the offense a little bit. Because again, I think Mike Norvell and this offensive coaches there at Florida State can get a lot out of their quarterbacks. But I mean, Shaun, we've seen Jordan Travis, who was a dual threat, Mackenzie Milton earlier as well.
Yeah.
I know he got that leg injury, but like he was a dual threat kid as well.
Good
And
call.
I mean, we haven't seen DJ Uyunglele yet, but like he brings a little bit more dual threat ability as far as being able to run quarterback power and like that type of stuff as well. So he has that element to him as well. So we'll see what the next trajectory is position.
Would you call Schmeichel the gunslinger of the class?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's definitely one of them. Yeah. He might be the gunslinger of the class. Yeah. I mean, I think Jared Curtis is a little bit of a gunslinger. You know who Jared Curtis reminds me of, Shaun, which is hilarious. I made this comp for him like 2 months before he committed to Georgia. He reminds me of Matt Stafford. And Matt Stafford is the definition of a gunslinger. Like, he is a gunslinger, dude. Like, no doubt about it. That guy has never seen a throw that he thinks he can't make. Never seen one. And I think Brady's got some of that in him, man.
He was really fun to watch last year as a quarterback in the NFL.
Agreed.
Because I think you like that gunslinger, but I think now his maturation mentally has kind of caught up to that gunslinger. And you watch him play now, you see a much more mature quarterback. And I think sometimes when you hear the word gunslinger, that kind of denotes that these guys they're just out there throwing it around. You know, they're just relying on their talent and their arm, and they don't know where to go with the football. And it's like, don't sell people short like that. You know, don't put them in a box. And we say they definitely have guts. That's what we mean. Like they believe in their arm. For me, that's what that means. And Brady Schmeichel definitely believes in his arm.
In the NFL scouting community, Shaun, we call that arm arrogance. And that young man has a lot of arrogance about his arm. And there's nothing wrong with that, man.
Nothing wrong at all.
Brett Favre seems like a terrible person, but I loved watching Brett Favre play, man, because he did not think for 1 second he couldn't make that throw. Not for 1 second. And it haunted him a lot. But I mean, he threw what? 400, 500 something touchdowns at the end of his career. So like a lot of good came out of feeling that way. A lot of good came. So yeah, Brady Schmeichel ends up with the Florida State Seminoles. Very interesting fit for him, and one that I think was going to pay off for them. Shaun, let's talk about this last one, because I have been very honest about this. Okay, I was a Brady Hart guy. There's no doubt
Yeah.
about that, in like the Hart versus Grubbs thing. But I like Grubbs as well, so very happy with Grubbs being Notre Dame's quarterback. But Shaun, from the minutes that there was a board, you know who my number one quarterback was, and that was Folsom, California high school quarterback Ryder Lions. Big
Mhm.
Ryder Lions fan, man. 6'2", now up to about 210, 215, somewhere in the ballpark. Pure dual threat quarterback. He is not committed to a school, Shaun, but there is a lot of smoke, and I think that there is legitimate smoke that he's going to end up with the USC Trojans. Okay.
Yeah.
And his brother, Walker, who was a very good tight end from Folsom as well in the 2023 class, he ends up at USC as well, but he's on a mission, so he'll be back, pretty soon for USC. I guess before next season, I guess, is when Walker Lions will be back. But man, I like Ryder Lions a lot, Shaun. I know there's talk about like mission guys or whatever, blah blah blah. All I know, Shaun, is Ryder Lions is good, man. He's really really good. And I'm not a big Lincoln Riley fan, but if Lincoln Riley is around offensively to work with the Ryder Lions, yeah, you might got something there. You might have something there, man. He's pretty dang good.
Probably going to end up being a pretty good player, right?
Yes.
It's so
Yes.
funny, right? Because we talk about a guy like Lincoln Riley, right? His
Mhm.
throwaways end up at, dude, you've been hearing the buzz about what's happening down in New Orleans at Saints camp. You know the young quarterback that's coming there and is starting to turn heads. And you talk about arm arrogance and like who evaluated him, who recruited him, and who got him to come to Oklahoma. Yeah. This is why you trust what Lincoln Riley sees in Ryder Lions. Like you can say what you want to say. You can talk about the school he comes from and you don't believe in that lineage. You can say all of that stuff. Look, man, it's Lincoln Riley. And regardless of what he can't recruit and can't have a defense or put together a defense to save his life, whether it's USC or Oklahoma. But what he can do is develop that quarterback position. That's what he can do, right? If he finds a way to keep Juju and adds Ryder Lions,
Well, he's probably not gonna be able to keep Juju, but that's another
yeah,
conversation
I
for
sense
another
that.
day.
I sense that's coming. I do sense that's coming. I
It's
do
in the
sense
air.
that's coming.
It's in
And,
the air.
and
Yeah.
if Juju ends up in a certain program in the SEC, oh man, I don't know what else to say, man. Or if he ends up in Colorado, that'll be interesting
He
as well.
he
But
he will not end up in Colorado. I can
you
guarantee you
know,
that one.
but
He's not going to be in Colorado.
yeah, I sense he's going to go to a certain program in the SEC. But at that point, we need to look at some type of monopoly rules for like college football. But no,
Oh,
all
it might
jokes
be
aside,
it might be a different SEC school than you believe it is, Shaun. Now that
no, no,
I'm
no,
hearing
no,
you
no. I'm
talking.
open to
Oh,
all SEC schools. I think it's going to
okay.
be an
Okay.
SEC school. I
Yeah,
definitely think it's going to be an
I think
SEC
it's going to
school.
be an SEC school as well. I
Yeah,
think it's going to be.
but
Yeah.
either one that I think
Yeah.
that quarterback position is pretty heavily stocked. So
Yes. Well, yeah, if it's the one
yes,
I think it is, though, it might
yes,
not be quite as well stocked as you think it is. But yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But Shaun, I think that Ryder Lyons gives a lot of the skill set that Lincoln Riley really likes, as far
Mm-hmm.
as being able to move the pocket at times,
Yes,
be able to throw in
yes,
rhythm, be able to
yeah.
throw off platform at times. But then, I mean, Caleb Williams can move, Shaun, right? Like he was a great improviser, a great scrambler, but he wasn't really a quarterback run game guy. I mean, he could do it occasionally if you wanted him to. But Lincoln Riley, early in his Oklahoma career, he got a lot out of those guys, man. Like Rattler wasn't a runner. Caleb Williams was a scrambler, not really a runner, but a scrambler. But before that, he had Kyler, he had Jalen
Yeah,
Hurts, he had some
yeah.
runners, man. And I'm telling you, Ryder Lions can run, dude.
Wasn't
So
it was almost like Rattler was like his attempt, his experimentation. Like, yeah, I can
a
develop this
pocket
type of
kid.
guy too, right? Let
Well,
me
that
prove
was
I
like
can develop this type of guy. And don't
that
forget,
was
Spencer Rattler was like everybody's like top, like, yo,
yeah. Oh,
this
I
dude,
remember seeing him throw for the first time. I'm like, oh, that kid's an NFL kid. Like,
yeah,
there's no doubt about it. And he didn't turn out to be what I thought he was going to be when he was a redshirt freshman. But he was actually Shaun. I don't know if you remember. Like he was Lincoln Riley's first starting quarterback that was his recruits. Like,
Yeah.
that was the first one before
Yeah.
Caleb. Like, that was the first one. I mean, otherwise it was grad transfer Baker, grad transfer or transfer Jalen Hurts. It was transfer Kyler Murray. Like, that was the sequence of quarterbacks.
Man, you
He
make a
has,
very that's a very interesting point, Double R.
yeah,
It's like really, literally, Ryder Lyons could end up being one of the most important full process,
yeah.
athletes and quarterbacks for him as a coach.
Because all he has is Caleb right now, man. Spencer Rattler was not a success. Spencer Rattler left. Like, that was not a
Yeah,
successful one. And then, like, if Miller Moss ends up being a good player, Miller Moss wasn't a Lincoln Riley recruit. He
wasn't a
was
Lincoln
already at
Riley
USC.
recruit.
That wasn't a
Yeah,
Lincoln Riley recruit. I guess
yeah,
I guess there's a world where Jaden Mayava, who is the transfer UNLV, comes in and he continues the transfer pipeline, but I don't
right.
necessarily think that that's going to happen. I mean, yeah, he hasn't shown that he can develop a quarterback from a
Consistently,
recruit
yeah,
to
yeah,
a, because we always talk about those Heisman Trophy winners. It's like only one of those Heisman Trophy winners was a recruit that Lincoln Riley got. Everybody else
yeah,
was a transfer.
yeah,
Spencer Rattler flamed out at Oklahoma, and
yeah,
yeah, so
yeah.
it'll be interesting. Gonna be interesting. So that's the quarterback, Shaun. Someone had said, "Oh, what about Antoine Hill?" I think someone had said in the chat. Antoine Hill's a 2025 kid. I mean, I don't
Mm.
know if you have any thoughts on that, Shaun, but Notre Dame recruited Antoine Hill, who's the Georgia quarterback that committed to Memphis over Florida over the weekend. They recruited him, but they didn't push for him. They kind of stopped pretty early on in that process because like
Hmm.
they knew Deuce was their guy, and then Bear Bachmeyer they liked as well. Like those were kind of their two guys early on. But Antoine Hill going to Memphis, man,
Huh.
that's interesting. 6'5", 220. I made the joke that going from Seth Hennigan to Antoine Hill on Twitter was like going from I think I said like a broken down golf cart to a Lambo, and
I
people
saw
didn't
that.
like, oh man, Seth Hennigan's one of the top 15 quarterbacks in college football. Relax, dude.
Relax.
One, I wasn't even talking about production. I was talking about talent. Like, let's be honest here, right? But yeah, Antoine Hill to Memphis is a weird one, man. That FedEx money is kicking in, my friend. It's kicking in.
I think that speaks to where college football is headed, though. And I think that makes it more exciting, especially going into the playoffs, right? You're excited if a Memphis can make it into that expanded field and they have a guy like Antoine Hill that's a top quarterback. That makes it a sexier game, right? Because you have a guy that could possibly be a first, second round pick at the quarterback position from a talent standpoint. Let's see what he can do. Let's see what he can do in this matchup. I want to see players like Antoine Hill go to programs like that. And I think NIL makes things like that possible. That who could ever think 10 years ago a kid would choose Memphis over Florida? Like, just think about that.
Did you see my one comment on it, Shaun, that Florida was going to try to convince people that he wasn't a take?
Oh, absolutely. That's all schools do that. Oh, we really didn't want them. Like, yeah, all right.
Yeah, right. Yeah, sure you did. You don't want the 6'5", 220-pound kid that has a rocket for an arm and
Mm-hmm.
can run. Yeah, sure you did.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. I'm interested to see how the Memphis program, because I mean, obviously Mike Norvell did a lot of great things, Shaun, but Coach Silverfield, I think, is the coach
Mm-hmm.
there. He seems to be kind of picking up where Coach Norvell. I mean, I know there was a couple years to start, but I mean, they won 10 games last year, and they're got some money behind their program now, which is big time for them. So we'll see, man. We'll see,
Yeah.
but gonna be interesting to see how Antoine Hill develops in Memphis. No doubt
Yeah.
about it. Folks, that's 2026 quarterback talk, though. I have an exciting interview that we're getting to next. Okay, so don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. Before we get there, though, like button, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell at the bottom of the screen. If you're listening to me or us on your favorite podcast platform, Apple, Spotify, anything else, make sure you're subscribed over there and hit a 5-star review. Boards.com for latest team and recruiting intel. We are inching closer and closer to the end of summer, which means we're inching closer and closer to the beginning of the 2024 football season. So make sure that you're locked in over there. We're going to show you guys an interview with Sharon Black next here on the Notre Dame Recruiting Hour on the Irish Breakdown podcast. Shaun, so luckily I had the chance to sit down with Sharon Black, who is the mother of 2025 Notre Dame offensive tackle commit, Will Black. Very fascinating backstory. Going to play this interview and then we'll kind of recap it at the end, Shaun. But This again was one of those where I tell Sharon, I tell Miss Black, hey, I'm only gonna keep you for like 15, 20 minutes. That's all. And then it's just such a great conversation, Shaun, that I look up, it's 30 minutes into the interview. You know what I mean? So love when that stuff happens. I know someone said that you love the parent interviews. I thank you so much, Gideon. It is one of my favorite things that we do here. Haven't done as much for the 2025 class, but I mean, Shaun, we've gotten to know so many great parents over the years, like Glenn James, like Don Schuler, like Debbie Otting, like Shonda Gray, like so many great people in this chat that have come on this channel. So, guys, no further ado, I'm going to bring you my interview with Sharon Black, mother of 2025 offensive tackle Will Black. Hope you all enjoy. Welcome back, everyone, to the Irish Breakdown podcast. It's Notre Dame Recruiting Hour, which means that we're giving you guys the latest on Notre Dame recruiting. But as we've done in the past, and I know that we've talked about a lot of great parents that have come on this show before. It's guys like Don Schuler, Glenn James, Shonda Gray, Christian Gray, who's going to be a starting corner for Notre Dame this season. We got Debbie Otting on before as well. We really love the parents' perspective because I know that we're always talking about what the athletes saying, where they're visiting, who they're talking to, offers coming out. And obviously that stuff is very important, but I don't think we focus enough on the support system, the family life, everything behind the scenes that makes these young men so special. So I wanted to bring on our first parents for the 2025 recruiting class. Got Miss Sharon Black, who is the mother of Notre Dame offensive tackle commits Will Black, all 6'7" plus, 280 plus pounds of him, number 5 overall player in the country, according to On3. Sharon, appreciate you for coming on. How's everything been going?
Great. Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I was excited that you were so nice to be able to come on because I know that we had been following each other for a little bit. So really excited to get your perspective because Will has a really remarkable backstory. You know, I know that you guys are from Canada originally. Obviously, he's playing down in Connecticut now, playing high level ball, and now he's committed to the University of Notre Dame. But I really wanted to start before we get into the background a little bit this past weekend. Now, Will's been committed to Notre Dame since December, so he's been committed for a long time now, but finally got to have his official visit to campus this past weekend. I know you were there with him as well. Would just love to hear your perspective on just that weekend. How did everything go? How did you enjoy the trip?
Well, it was something that we were really looking forward to for a long time. And through this whole process, it's been Will and I going to the camps and, touring the prep schools in the States and going to the camps last summer and visits. And it's just been the two of us. And for the official visit, he really wanted his sisters to be there, and I wanted his sisters to be there so that because they just don't, because we're Canadian and we didn't grow up a football family following college football, they didn't really fully understand. And so they came as well as Will's girlfriend. So it was 5 of us. And honestly, it was such a fabulous weekend. His sisters were in awe the whole weekend. So was I, even though I've been there many times. I love going to Notre Dame. Honestly, we just walked away thinking, gosh, wish we could do that again. It was so fun.
Yeah. Well, and I would love to hear about, because for people that follow these types of conversations about official visits and what people do, obviously it's a lot about, because I know the recruits this weekend, they were grilling steaks at one point, right? They're having different events. They're sitting down with coaches. They're hearing from different people. A lot of great opportunities, obviously. But from a parent's perspective, what are some things that you guys get to do during this type of events, right? Like, what do the families get to do? Because I know that there is obviously time that you are with Will enjoying those conversations, but then there's other times where he's just with the commits and he's with the coaches and that type of stuff. So what does a family get to do, kind of given that perspective of an official visit?
Well, we do a lot of things that the players do, but then they definitely did separate us. So, do you want me to kind of go over the weekend?
I would love to, maybe just a couple of your favorite highlights if you can. Like, yeah, just a couple of things would be great.
Well, some of the things that really stood out to me were they showed us, well, obviously we did introductions to all the coaches, so that's pretty standard. They showed us videos and renderings of the new athletic facility, and it's the Shields Family Athletic Center
Yeah.
that they have already started building. It was really interesting seeing, they showed video where it looked like you were actually walking in the building. And that's just exciting. We did not pick the school for any of that because we didn't even know about it until
Sure.
we went for the spring visit. They didn't dangle it like a carrot. They didn't even talk about it until months after Will was committed. But obviously it's been in the works for a long time. That was pretty interesting. It's going to be exciting. Like Notre Dame, Will pick Notre Dame because it is a great academic institution. It has great football and great coaches, and the athletic center is a bonus. It's icing on the cake. So that was interesting. We got to tour some housing, which we hadn't done before. We were interested to talk about that and how that all works at Notre Dame. We were pleasantly surprised. They've got a lot of options, great places to live. And we had our meetings with the Coach Freeman. That was the first time that Will's sisters and his girlfriend had met Coach Freeman. He's always so great and so easy to talk to and so personable. And we go into his office, and it's always a great meeting that I look forward to. It's also Coach Rudolph. We had some good meetings with him as well.
Awesome.
And then obviously there was the Friday night, there was the party at Coach Freeman's house. So we all went to that, and that was just, it was a really great spot. I couldn't believe how many people were there. Like, he invited, it wasn't only the people on official visits and their family, it was a lot of staff was there. Their spouses were there, their children were there. I would say there were like maybe 200 people there. And it was just, and we got to really have great conversations. And I found throughout the social events, so there was the social on Friday night, and then there was a social on Saturday night when the players left and they went with some current players. And I spent a lot of time talking to coaches' wives and other parents as well. And that I honestly, I haven't done any other official visits, so I don't know if that's normal, but Coach Freeman always talks about how it's a family, and how important family is. And he wants to talk to the players on a regular basis. He wants to know their families. He wants his kids around. He wants the coaches' kids around. He's got bowls and bowls of candy in his office because he wants, when the kids come, he wants them to come to his office and eat candy. I think that's really actually quite unique.
Yeah.
It's unique about Notre Dame. They also have a parent coordinator, like a teen mom. So I had met her twice before, and she did a presentation. And I think that that's quite unique to Notre Dame. Her son started, I believe, in 2017. He's graduated now. She became team mom. She kind of it just sort of happened naturally that she started organizing events for the parents, and she did such a good job that Coach Freeman hired her on. And she will do things for us. Like she'll just make it really easy, because I was already a little bit nervous about how, when do I have to book hotel rooms, and they book so far out in advance, and how much is it going to cost, and how many games am I going to go to? And she makes it so that she books blocks of rooms, so you can stay with a lot of parents, which is nice to get, parents can socialize together. You don't have to stay in those rooms, but she organizes events before and after the games and just connects the parents. And also you can ask her any questions. So you don't, there will be a lot of questions along the way. You don't want to go to the coaches and ask coaches questions. You don't even want to always bother the staff because they're so busy, and she's there to help us because she's been doing it for so long. She has all the answers, and she's such a friendly lady. That was definitely helpful for me. I found that very, very good for it just makes me feel more relaxed. Um, and then other things that we did with the boys, we did the sports performance meetings. So they had different areas set up,
Mhm.
and we talked, and they just showed how they train these boys and what they look at, and all the support that they have, and that they look at them as a whole person rather than just, building muscle.
Yeah,
And they explained that to us really well, which obviously makes the parents feel really good,
sure.
um, looking at it from a holistic perspective.
Mhm.
Um, they also we also had some meetings about NIL and how that works. And then they had the cookout, so we went for lunch, and I think they had at least 30 barbecues set up, and it was the previously before that, when we had the sports performance meetings, they had a little competition where the boys had to make smoothies, and then
Nice.
they'd have three boys go up at a time, and then they rate their smoothies. So that was just a fun little competition. But then they did the cookout, and the cookout was the boys cooking
Yeah,
for their families. So they had steak and salmon and chicken wings, and that was a fun event.
that's
I thought
awesome.
that was really unique,
How
rather than
how
just
if I can interject, how are Will's cooking skills? Is he got some game on the grill or
yeah. He no, he definitely can take care of himself. I have to say, I do a lot of cooking for him.
Sure.
I enjoy doing that, but he is actually quite self-sufficient. He doesn't live at home during the school year. He doesn't have to cook for himself, but he definitely has to take care of himself and do his own laundry at school. So he knows how to take care of himself. But
That's
no, he
awesome.
did a good job. I think his sisters did some salmon that they might have messed up on, but no, it was fun. And then we did the photo and video shoot, and that was so
Mhm.
much fun. And
Oh,
that was different than it has been in the past,
mhm.
because every time Will's done a photo shoot, he's by himself.
Sure.
And this one was in a large room, and they had two areas set up depending on, a white and a green backdrop. Some of the boys were wearing the green jersey, some were wearing white, and they had them all together. So they had like the O-line boys together, and then the O-line boys were with Deuce. And then, they did a lot of that. And then you could do the individual, and you could do them with your family. That was fun, and that was definitely really fun for Will's sisters. And then the video party. Did you hear anything about the video party?
The video party. No, I haven't heard the video party. I've seen
So,
a lot of
so
clips from the video shoot, but nothing about
yeah,
a
that's
video
what I mean.
party.
The video
Oh,
shoot.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. Oh, I saw at one point they were chanting for everyone, like, getting
yeah.
everyone
So
super
they kind
pumped
of made
up.
it
Yeah.
into like a mini concert. Like, you walked in, and it was a dark room, and it was music playing, and a stage and lights, and people like jumping around like a concert. And that was really fun. That was
Incredible.
definitely unique as well. That was
That
it, there's a lot of you go and have fun, and you want to get some great information, but
mhm.
they definitely did some stuff that was just lots
I
of
I'm
yeah.
always so amazed with just how much stuff they fit into, like, a 2.5 day slot. You know what I mean? Like, it is just absolutely outrageous to think about.
Our schedule was jam-packed from wake up call at 7:15 until the end of the night. I think one night ended at 11, one night ended at 12. It was a full schedule. We drove home on Sunday quite tired, but it was just so much fun. We also went to the golf course.
Yeah.
Um, Notre Dame has a golf course, the Warren Golf Club, and that's where we had dinner. And then a lot of us ended up on the driving range, and that was
Nice.
fun too. And Will golfs, so he was pretty comfortable there. You could tell some of the boys
Showing
were,
off a little bit? Is he showing off a little
well,
bit?
you can
Yeah.
definitely hit it pretty far. So that was fun too. And then we did we went back to the stadium, and this was something that I was really looking forward to, because I have been down on the field a few times, like after a game, during visits, just being down on the field, watching yeah, before games, after games, and I've been on the field a few times, and it's really special. Whether there are fans there or not, you stand on the field and you look around, and it's just such a special place. And when there are so many fans in the stands, it's it's just kind of it's crazy.
I,
It's a very exciting. And when it's empty, then you imagine all the fans there, and you imagine the players and how they feel in front of all the fans, and they gotta have to block it out to play the game. So I really wanted Will's sisters to experience that. So
mhm.
they did a little event called Pass the Torch. And so it started off, the players were not on the field, the families were on the field, and they showed some video of some Notre Dame video of just their regular video when they're promoting Notre Dame, and also some player video. And then the players were called out, and they came out one at a time and shook Marcus Freeman's hand, and then ran to their families one at a time. They were coming out, and then it was such an emotional time. I was
I'm
talking
sure.
to the other O-line parents, and we were teary. It was just so emotional, and we got to spend quite a bit of time on the field, but just standing there thinking about what is this? How did my son accomplish this? And how did this happen? And this is like living in a dream. And I'm so proud of him. And we all the parents feel the same way. We we're just so happy for our boys that they get to experience that. And honestly, Notre Dame is just different. It is just so unique. We all feel so relaxed and so happy that our
Yeah.
boys are going to go to an institution where they're going to get a great education. They're going to be surrounded by really, honestly and truthfully, I really feel like these Notre Dame coaches are good men. They're good role
Yes.
models. I
Hmm.
feel I trust them. They're going to be surrounded by great role models. They're going to play great football. They're going to make great connections. And the fact that my son is Canadian and gets to experience that, I
Yeah.
can't even explain how grateful I am and how excited I am for him. It's just thrilling.
Well, you explained the feeling of Notre Dame about as well as anyone I've ever heard, Sharon. Because honestly, I've been a Notre Dame fan my entire life, and I've been there as well several times to campus and just kind of experiencing the player walk and walking around and walking past the grotto and doing all those types of things. And everyone always asks other people, right? Like, what feeling did you get when you get on campus? And I can never quantify it well
No,
enough, to be honest. Like, it's so hard. It's just there is literally just a feeling that just kind of overtakes you when you're there. I really don't know how to explain it, but I think you did it as eloquently as I've ever heard anyone say it. It's
I,
crazy.
I feel like when I'm there, it's very peaceful. And actually, somebody sent me a quote on Twitter or X, and it said, because I said Notre Dame was just a special place, and it was a quote, and it was those who have been there need no explanation. Those who haven't been there need no explanation. You
Yeah,
just can't explain it,
you really
but
can't.
it's definitely a different feeling when you're there.
That's why so many recruits, I feel like they like Notre Dame and then they get to campus and they're like, oh, this is just different, right? Like that's when that feeling kind of really hits you. I would love to, and because I mean you covered so many great topics from this weekend. I think people are really going to dig just kind of a little bit background as far as like what everyone truly sees. And that is obviously a jam-packed schedule. I would love to just ask you a couple questions about Will's background athletically because it's obviously so unique. You mentioned it. You guys come from Canada. I know I heard a interview that he did when he was down at the On 3 Elite series where he had talked about like his hockey background, and he's a very good speaker for his age, by the way. I was not that good of a speaker when I was that young. I was not, to be honest with you. But I know he has a very interesting background, obviously coming from Canada. I guess my question overall for you is, I know I read something that he has played lacrosse, obviously he played hockey, I think basketball at one point as well. Would just love to hear, like, when did you know as his parent that like he was a little bit of a different type of athlete? Like he was a guy that maybe could be something special and is what he's turned into now, obviously.
Okay, well, to be honest, when he started playing hockey, he was shining on the ice. And so when you start playing hockey, it's just everyone's kind of at the same level,
Sure.
and we have AAA and AA programs in London, where we live in London, Ontario, and they're
Mhm.
very good programs. And as soon as he could make the AA team, he made it. And I was really I guess I really knew from talking to other dads, and they kept telling me how much potential he had in hockey. And I I mean, I'm not really a real sports person. I can't really look at a player. I mean, obviously, if they're scoring all the goals, it's easy, but there's so many different positions where you don't score goals.
Sure.
And so I knew he was quite athletic. But with hockey, basically, I think his body became too big for hockey, and he did lose interest. So he continued to play, but not at the highest level. And but he was always had great hand-eye coordination and just liked sports. He did play basketball a little bit. He played lacrosse just in the summer once. He didn't love that, but he's good. He was good at kind of any sport that he tried. We have golfed a lot as a family, so he's been golfing since he was probably 3. Um, and so with football, he said that he wanted to play football when he went to high school. And so I kind of, okay. And so then he couldn't play in grade 9 because there were no sports in grade 9 because of COVID.
Mhm.
So that was a very quiet year. So then he started playing in grade 10, and right away, um, a lot of the dads were coming up to me and talking to me about his potential, how he could play in university here, and he was playing both sides of the ball. He was playing basically the whole game, He and by the end of the game, he was just like muddy because there was a lot of rain and that, and then the football coaches started talking to me and asking me if he could play in the summer league. And the summer league is actually better than the high school league because you're getting the best players on one
Mhm.
from the whole city on one team, and then you're competing with um, with teams in the province.
Gotcha.
So he did that, and that is when I really knew that he had potential, just because of all the people that started reaching out to us and all the attention he was getting from the university coaches. He was getting offers like a- as as soon as he could from universities in Canada. Um, and then it all started with prep schools reaching out to us,
Sure.
and he came to me, and he was telling he because they actually reached out to him. Weren't
Mhm.
reaching out to me. Because he had his huddle on Twitter, and they were finding him on Twitter. And he came to me and he said, I want to go to prep school in the States." And I specifically remember I was in this room, and it was July of 2022. And I said, "Really?" I said, "So you're telling me in a year from now, you want to leave Canada? You want your he was 16 when he told me this." And I'm like, "So when you're 17, you want to leave home and you want to actually leave the country?" And he said, "I do." And I was not on board with it at
Mhm.
first. I was definitely not
I
on board with it.
I have 2 girls. They're very young, but I would not be on board either, to be honest with you.
No.
Yeah, I totally get it.
So what I did was I just talked to as many people as I could to and I do have quite a few friends whose children went and played NCAA sports, but not football, like a couple of hockey and tennis and running and track and field. And I just talked to them because I honestly thought, how do you do it all? How do you get a great education and play high level sports? And for me, education is so important for my son to get a great education. So I talked to whoever I knew that had been through it,
Mhm.
and then I was convinced that it was really actually a great thing.
Yeah.
And then we started having Zoom calls with coaches at prep schools, and it was like Florida and Georgia and Virginia, North Carolina. Those schools were reaching out to us, and I really, for me, it was definitely, how can football make my son's life better? What can football do for him?
Yeah.
And I was not comfortable sending him to any of these schools that were reaching out to us. So I found out that the best prep schools are in New England. So I started looking at Max Preps and just did that, all the research. Research. Was connected to. There were people calling us to try to help us, like different scouts, but I refused to hire somebody just because I just didn't feel like I could really trust anybody.
Sure.
And I didn't want to spend a lot of money on this. I was like, if he's good, he doesn't need a scout. And then he's not going if he's not good. So if he's good enough, let's see what happens. And then we just, I connected with coaches. We had a lot of Zoom calls, a lot of Zoom calls with coaches. And then we went and visited some schools and picked Choate. And Coach Spinato is, honestly, he's a great coach. He's very well known and he does a phenomenal job. They win all the time.
Yeah.
They win the knapsack all the time. And we just really connected with him. And then that's how it all happened.
Love it. Love it. Well, my last question for you, Sharon, because I'm taking up way too much of your time, but this is just such a great conversation. I wanted to ask you just to end this one, because son's about to be a senior now, right? Like, stuff is going to happen very quickly here. And I know that he has accomplished so much already at this point. You know, like I said, he's a 5-star by his service, number 5 overall player in the country. You've already talked about it. Academics are very important to him. He's going to the University of Notre Dame, which is one of the best academic schools in the world. Forget about just the country, in the entire world. And he's done this at such a young age. I just want to ask, from the mother's perspective, and you're allowed to boast about your son for a second, just how proud are you of him? I mean, obviously a great kid and has accomplished a lot at such a young age already.
Oh, I'm super proud of him. Like, he is just, honestly, he is so dedicated. He really is so focused. He has goals and he is working towards those goals, and he doesn't have to be pushed. And I have to say that it can't come from the parents, because the children have to do the work. The athletes have to do the work. They have to want it really badly, because it's not an easy road. And I've said to him a number of times, and not lately, but in the beginning, a number of times I said to him, you know, if you change your mind and you don't want to do this, it's fine. I am totally fine. If you want to come back to Canada, quit football, come back to Canada. You don't want to do this. You feel that it's not the road you want to take. You feel like it's too much pressure, too much work. It's okay. And he just laughs at me and he's like, no, I want this. So I'm so proud of him. He's just, some of the things that he does, he's got a schedule and he sticks to it. And I mean, the day that we left to go to the official visit, we drove. And we drove because we can drive there in 5.5 hours. And the plan was to leave around 10 o'clock. He goes and practices. We have a university here. He goes and practices on the field. He was out on the field at 7:15 in the morning practicing, because he wanted to get that practice in before he got in the car. That is not a coach telling him to do that. That is not me telling him to do that. That is him. And he's so focused. I'm so proud of him. He's really very mature, and I know he will do well. And who knows what will happen with football. You know, I know he's going to give it 100% effort, but who knows what will happen with football. But I know he's going to be able to handle the academics and the football together, and I'm so proud of him.
Yeah. Well, I really wanted to end there, because you have done a tremendous job with Will and he's accomplishing so much. And I know, I know for the ordinary people, it's a sacrifice that you made as well as him to be able to make this journey what it is so far. So, Sharon Black, mother of Notre Dame 2025 offensive tackle commit Will Black. Sharon, I really appreciate your time so much today. I told you about 15 minutes. We're about 30 right now, but really. Oh, no. It was incredible. Honestly, like I didn't want to cut this conversation short. I just want to thank you again so much for joining me today. This was a blast. It really
Okay,
was.
thank you. Thank you for having me.
Shaun Davis, Sharon Black, mother of Will Black, 2025 offensive tackle commit to the University of Notre Dame. Shaun, breaking news. Notre Dame kids are raised by really good people. Who would have thought? Who would have thought that this would be a reality that we're in?
It's an interesting dynamic when you talk about recruiting at Notre Dame, because you have to recruit the parents just as much as you recruit the kids. You have to evaluate the parents just as much as you evaluate the kids. And I think that's something that makes Notre Dame and its recruitment unique. And every time we speak to the parents of these young men, we understand why the majority of the time they end up being the great young men that they end up being, because that foundation is there. And you can tell from the conversations we have with their parents. And she's no different. She's a clear view into who Will Black is as a young man.
Yeah, it's really well said. It was a great interview, but not a great interview because of me, because a great interview because of she was awesome. Shaun, I love, and Sharon admitted this, she talks a lot, and that's great. That's what great interviews come from, right? People that like to talk and put great information out there, okay? Wonderful woman, wonderful family. Folks, hope you enjoyed it. Thank you all for sticking around for another great parent interview here on the show. Before you head out, make sure hit that like button, subscribe to the podcast, and hit the notification bell. As always, also go over to your favorite podcast platform, 5-star reviews, and subscribe over there. Boris@irishbreakdown.com. That's Shaun Davis, co-host of the Lucky Lefty podcast, recruiting analyst here at irishbreakdown.com. I am Ryan Roberts. Thank you all for joining the show today, and we'll talk to you again very soon here on the Irish Breakdown podcast.